What if the next seismic move for the Boston Celtics isn't about star power or blockbuster headlines, but about balance, survival, and longevity? What if the key to defending the throne lies not in replacing firepower, but in reinforcing stability? A name is surfacing again, and no, it's not one that screams flashy headlines. But maybe, just maybe, that's exactly why it matters. Boston has been operating in the shadows this offseason. Moves were made, yes, but none of them screamed Plan A. These weren't luxury acquisitions made from a position of control. They were survival choices, tactical pivots, reactions to unavoidable shifts in a fragile roster structure. The sudden loss of Al Horford's durability, Porzingis' body once again falling into question, and the thin ice under the feet of Luke Cornet left one truth glaring in the face of the Celtics front office. Boston needs a center. Not a project, not a maybe, a real, proven, playoff-caliber big man. And now, the conversation has quietly begun to circle around a name that hasn't felt like a Celtics fit in years, but suddenly makes too much sense to ignore. Nikola Vucevic. Yes, the same Vucevic whose calm consistency was often overshadowed by Chicago's chaos. The same Vucevic who, in his mid-30s, is still putting up numbers that most big men in their prime struggle to match. According to a recent trade proposal from Cal Durrett at Hoops Habit, Boston could land the two-time All-Star by flipping Anthony Simons, the very player they acquired in the Jrue Holiday fallout. Now ask yourself, what does that tell us? It tells U.S. Boston's front office might already be prepared to pivot again. They brought Simons in during a forced reshuffling, but maybe he was never the end game. Maybe he was the setup piece. A chess move to turns ahead, and it gets even more intriguing when you look at the numbers. Vucevic's 2023-24 campaign saw him average 18.5 points, 10.1 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and shoot over 53% from the field, including a ridiculous 40.2% from beyond the arc. Those are not bench filler stats. Those are starting center for a title contender numbers. And while he may not anchor a defense like Robert Williams in his prime, Vucevic brings something that Boston now desperately lacks: physical presence, scoring touch, and playoff experience under pressure. What if the two trades we already saw weren't the real plan? What if they were just a smokescreen, the opening act, the necessary sacrifices to open a door that's only now starting to creak open? While everyone's been focused on what Boston has lost, maybe we should be asking something far more dangerous. What is Brad Stevens about to gain? In an offseason already jolted by the sudden loss of Jason Tatum to an Achilles tear and the unavoidable reality of a suffocating luxury tax, the Boston Celtics had no choice but to move decisively. First came the Jrue Holiday trade, shipping the veteran defensive anchor to Portland. Then, just days later, came the unexpected departure of Kristaps Porzingis. Both gone, both instrumental, both exits that would have sent other franchises into full-blown crisis mode. But Boston isn't panicking. Because, according to NBA insider Jake Fischer, the Celtics are still working the phones, and this time, it's not out of desperation, it's strategy. Fischer revealed that Boston has recently held conversations with Memphis and other teams. The focus: potential trades involving Anthony Simons and Georges Niang. Here's where it gets wild. Simons was just acquired. He's 26. He's averaged 20 points per game for 3 straight seasons. He's on an expiring deal worth over $27 million. In most cases, that's a building block. So why is he already on the trade block? Because Stevens doesn't think in straight lines. He thinks in layers. Simons may have always been a trade chip, a temporary asset used to acquire someone else. His scoring is real. His upside is undeniable. But does he fit the current timeline? The roster chemistry, the positional needs after losing Horford and Porzingis? Maybe not. And if Stevens can extract more value from a player Boston didn't even draft, it would be the kind of chess move that shifts the Eastern Conference's balance again. And then there's Georges Niang. The casual fan might scoff at his name in trade rumors. But don't. Niang isn't just a throw-in. He's a veteran who shoots the three at volume, spaces the floor, and plays with edge. His value on a one-year, $8 million deal makes him one of the most movable pieces in the league. Cheap enough to tempt contenders, productive enough to demand real assets in return. Did the Celtics just outsmart the Raptors in the trade that no one's talking about enough? What if I told you the Boston Celtics quietly walked away from a deal that looked bigger on paper, only to walk into a better one that barely made headlines? What if this wasn't just about Jrue Holiday, but about a long-term financial trap Boston escaped with precision timing? Because here's the truth no one's fully processing. The Raptors tried to outbid the Blazers, and the Celtics said no. Not because the offer lacked talent, not because it lacked value, but because it came with a hidden cost that could have haunted Boston's next 3 seasons. Let's break this down. According to NBA insider Jake Fischer, Toronto stepped up with a serious offer for Holiday. They put the 9 overall pick in the 2025 draft on the table. That's the kind of draft capital that usually makes executives pause. But they didn't stop there. They also offered RJ Barrett, a former top 3 pick who just averaged 21 points per game. On paper, this looked like a massive win. A lottery pick and a scoring wing for a 35-year-old veteran. And yet, Boston walked away. Why? Because this wasn't a basketball decision. It was a chess move rooted in financial clarity. RJ Barrett's contract is worth over $57 million across the next 2 seasons. That kind of commitment, for a player who still hasn't proven he can consistently perform under playoff pressure, would have crushed the Celtics' cap flexibility. It would have locked them into a future they didn't believe in. So instead, Brad Stevens took the Portland offer. Simpler, cleaner. Anthony Simons, 26 years old, coming off 3 straight 20-point seasons, and here's the key, on an expiring deal worth $27 million. No long-term wait, no bloated cap, just options. And in a league where optionality is everything, Boston kept control of the board. Now think about this. Boston didn't just pass on RJ Barrett, they passed on a lottery pick. That tells us one thing with chilling clarity: Brad Stevens has a plan, and he's not swayed by shiny distractions. This also means the Celtics never saw Barrett as the answer. They didn't want another volume scorer. They didn't need a ball-dominant wing who clogs the same space as Tatum and Brown. And they definitely didn't want to carry his contract while navigating luxury tax hell and the new CBA's punitive apron restrictions. The Raptors, in desperation, tried to unload salary disguised as value. Boston didn't blink. Is Boston secretly building toward the most dangerous trade in NBA history? What if the Celtics aren't just navigating a transition year, but quietly positioning themselves to make the most shocking move of the decade? What if this isn't about depth or flexibility or simply surviving without Jason Tatum? What if it's all been a slow, calculated march toward something far more explosive? Giannis Antetokounmpo in green and white? It might sound like fantasy, but insiders are confirming the whispers. Boston is deep in trade talks, actively fielding calls, and not just listening, but engaging. One of those conversations reportedly involves the Memphis Grizzlies. Another involves an unnamed all-star guard receiving a contract offer from the Celtics. And looming in the background, like a storm that hasn't made landfall yet, is a blockbuster framework that could land the 2-time MVP in Boston. Let's not pretend this is just smoke. This is something bigger. The proposed trade, massive. Celtics receive Giannis Antetokounmpo. Age Green. Bucks receive Jaylen Brown, Anthony Simons, Peyton Pritchard, 3 unprotected first-round picks in 2026, 2028, and 2030. On the surface, it looks like too much. Jaylen Brown is fresh off a Finals MVP. Simons is a 20-point scorer on an expiring deal. And Pritchard is the heart of Boston's bench unit. But take a breath. Look again. What if this isn't just about names on paper, but a structural reinvention? What if Boston isn't just trading up in talent, but trading forward in timeline? Antetokounmpo is 29. Already a 2-time MVP, already a champion, and still in his prime. His presence alongside a healthy Jason Tatum could create the most dominant forward duo since LeBron and AD, except this pairing would be younger, hungrier, and more versatile. The Celtics proved they can win it all without Giannis, but imagine if they added him to what already worked. That's not just repeating success, that's redefining it. Now consider this. Boston's front office knows Tatum may miss a large chunk of the upcoming season, recovering from a torn Achilles. That gives them an unusual window, one season where expectations drop, pressure softens, and opportunity quietly expands. A perfect moment to recalibrate, and here's where it gets even more intriguing. Jaylen Brown is under the largest contract in league history. Moving him now at peak value could actually open up more long-term flexibility than keeping him locked in. Meanwhile, Giannis' deal, while massive, is linear, structured, predictable, and if Giannis himself wants out of Milwaukee, Boston becomes one of the only teams with the assets, the vision, and the culture to absorb him without imploding. There's also this unspoken truth. Pairing Tatum and Giannis would instantly neutralize every Eastern Conference threat. No more worries about Embiid's dominance in the paint. No more matchup nightmares against Bam. No more doubts about who owns the East.